Welcome everyone, good afternoon. The title of this talk is Tools for Java E7, Evolution or Revolution. So, to introduce myself, I'm Petr Jiřička and I'm the development manager working on the NetBeans IDE team, and I'm responsible for the web applications area, which includes the Java EE platform and support for Java EE in the NetBeans IDE. As well as the client-side tools around HTML, CSS, JavaScript. So this is just a standard disclaimer because we are going to talk about possible product directions and future stuff. So just letting you know that anything may change and nothing is set in stone. So how many of you have seen a slide like this before? Okay, looks like very many. So basically, this is a list of technologies which are new in Java E7 or updated in Java E7. Some of these are minor updates, some of these are major updates, some are completely new. But this is actually not what we are going to talk about today. So the purpose of this presentation is not to provide a comprehensive list of things that may change or will change in IDEs with Java E7. This is a very broad area, and I'm sure there are specialized talks about JSF, JPA, CDI, JMS, and other things that you may want to go to. So this will be a very small subset of what you see here, and we will just focus on a few things of these because this presentation is too short to cover all of this. So what are we going to talk about? So in the first part, I'd like to talk about the changes which are kind of evolutionary in the Java E7 platform. So Java E6 is a very mature and established platform. And basically there are many changes that build on top of this maturity and provide more in this area, more features, more alignment, more ease of use, ease of development, and so this is the first part of the talk. At the same time, Java E7 contains some technologies which will enable and accelerate development of new kind of applications. These applications are sometimes referred to as basically HTML5 applications, or also thin server applications. So have people heard the term thin server apps? I also heard the term POH5, plain old HTML5. So those are the kind of names how people refer to these applications. And actually related to this, who of you have been at the keynote on Sunday and has seen the demo of the new NetBeans 7.3? So quite a few. So you may know that at this talk we introduced a new support for HTML5 development in NetBeans called Project Ezel. And basically, this is targeting exactly this kind of applications. Have people been to other talks on Project Ezel and about what it is? Who has seen some other talks? Okay, so again, quite a few of you. So we don't have enough space in this presentation to talk about Project Ezel and such and all the features that it has. I would like to refer you to NetBeans.org. So NetBeans.org has all the information on the new HTML5 features in NetBeans 7.3. So here it is. Just click here. There are a couple of screencasts, wiki pages, and some more. Just briefly, the main features of the Project Ezel HTML5 application development are there is a new HTML5 application project which contains JavaScript testing. There is major improvements in the JavaScript editor, and this has basically been rewritten from scratch. There is a visual page inspector and visual CSS style editor, so I think this looks very nice in the screencast, so I recommend you to watch the screencast. There is JavaScript debugger, so basically you can put breakpoints in your JavaScript code and debug it live. And all this works actually with currently two browsers. First, there is a Chrome plugin. So NetBeans has a plugin to Chrome, which basically enables all the debugging and page inspection and styling in Chrome. And then we also have the embedded WebKit browser, which is a component running right inside the IDE window, and it's WebKit based. So basically, it will be compatible with many modern browsers such as Chrome, Safari, mobile Safari, Android browser, and all these. So if you are interested in this area, look at NetBeans.org. Actually, one thing I'd like to also mention is that, or announce, is that NetBeans 7.3 beta was released just today, and this release contains all the features that I'm talking about. So feel free to go to NetBeans.org and download the brand new NetBeans 7.3 beta. So what I would like to talk about here is actually some aspects of this HTML5 development which were not mentioned before and which are more kind of relevant to Java E7 applications and new capabilities in this area that Java E7 provides. And maybe look at some things from a new angle that wasn't mentioned in the previous presentations. So first, let's start to talk about kind of general basics that I would like to expect in Java E7 tools. So these are just very basic things that are taken for granted, and you don't even think about them. So you would like to have code completion for new APIs that are in the E7 platform. Like you see on the screenshot on the right, that's a class from the new JAX-RS 2.0 API. And you see that it's in the code completion, and there is documentation and so on. And there is things like supporting the new formats of deployment descriptors, config files, and so on, deploying to new versions of servers. So you don't even talk about those. That's just taken for granted. One thing that may not be too obvious is that NetBeans team actually provides and maintains the Maven archetypes for Java EE technology. So when you create a Maven EE application in NetBeans, it uses a standard archetype that's published in the central repository, and that can be used by anyone, not just NetBeans users, command line, or you can use it from other IDEs. So of course we plan to update these archetypes to support Java E7 as well. Let's now talk about some of the more prominent specifications in E7 and what we can expect in the established technologies. So I think JSF 2.0 was a really good release of JSF, and even the biggest haters of JSF 1.x needed to say that JSF 2.0 was much better, and it really worked. So JSF 2.2 has many further improvements on top of that. Again, I'm not going to talk about most of them. Here are just the main ones. There is the faces flow, which is a new visit-like flows support. So basically, if you have multi-page scenarios, they are now easily supported in JSF 2.2. There is support for HTML5. So for example, HTML5 has data attributes which are now allowed, and basically JSF 2.2 allows you to specify these through special tags. Similarly, HTML5 relaxes rules around the ID attribute, so maybe currently any element in HTML can contain an ID attribute, and JSF 2.2 reflects this. JSF 2.2 relies on the new expression language 3.0, which is actually a separate spec, but for the purposes of this slide, I think it's quite tied to JSF and quite related to JSF, so let's mention it in this context, which contains support for lambda expressions and operators on collections that can act as queries on objects in collections. And there is a feature that I heard about called multi-templating, but I'm not actually sure whether that's in JSF 2.2 or not, or whether it was left out. And basically that's support for skinning and having multiple skins to a component. So how is it going to work in a tool? So I have this project here called Java 6 and 7 Playground. So if you look at some JSF page. So currently in tools you expect that basically you will have code completion everywhere, and that you can just select anything, and the IDE is intelligent about what's in your application and what it can do. So here are the methods of the controller and so on. And so what's new in here? So there is this P namespace declared, and as you can see, there is this red icon, which means that NetBeans 7.3 currently does not yet support E7. So basically, NetBeans does not yet understand this namespace. What this will do is basically, here is how you use it. So actually, I can now create an attribute called P something, and this will actually be transformed to the HTML5 data attribute that we discussed earlier. So data attributes in HTML5 can be supported through this way through the new P namespace. Another notable feature here is this thing. So faces flow scope, that's a new scope basically that is tied to the faces flow feature. So you have extensions in the expression language, and basically you would expect to have code completion here, which doesn't work right now correctly. So let's go on to the next area, which is Java Persistence 2.0. So the new features here are stored procedure support. So basically you can have a name query. Let me just show it right now. And okay. So here is a name store procedure. So if you have a store procedure in your database, you can refer to it and basically expose it through JPA APIs. And the next area is updates and deletes through criteria API. So far you were only to be able to do queries through criteria APIs. Now you can do also updates and deletes. Enhanced JPQL syntax. So I'm not going to go into detail here, but basically right now you can have code completion here in the JPQL. So of course you would expect your IDE to also offer the new syntax of JPQL and the enhanced syntax of JPQL in the code completion. And that's what you can expect your tool to do. Multi-tenancy is a very big feature that I don't even want to go into. I just mention it because it's very prominent, but if you are interested, please go to a JPA specific talk. CDI has lots of enhancements here. So this is a screenshot of a block of the Weld implementation. Again, I'm not going to go through all these. Refer to the source if you are interested. So one thing that's actually notable about CDI is that, and we'll see that later, is that it works now much better with all the other specs. And so the situation is that actually in Java 6, CDI was basically thrown in the platform at the last minute, and there are many rough edges, and not everything works across all the technologies. So E7 is much more well-rounded, and it supports CDI is supported in many more contexts. So one kind of fallout from that is basically that JSF managed bean may become deprecated or not needed, because you can fully replace it with CDI, and you probably don't need managed beans anymore in E7. EJB 2.2 for completeness, it's alignment with JMS 2.0, which is a major revision, is obviously the obvious item that I would expect here. Other than that, it's mostly small adjustments to the behavior. One important aspect of the tooling that I would like to mention is that in tools, it's important that all specs are considered together, not in isolation. So you may have some wizards which generate some pieces of code. And I'm not a fan of big wizards that generate lots of code, but sometimes they can still be useful. And it's good if these wizards are basically aware of multiple technologies at the same time. So just as an example, here in the manufacturer entity that was generated, you see lots of kind of Java X persistence import that, as you would expect. But also there is some bin validation imports. Let's see how they are used. So basically, this reflects the database column size. And if you, so basically NetBeans is aware of the fact that you should not exceed the column size of your entities, of your tables, and so it puts the bin validation constraints on the columns. Similarly, you may want to pass your entity through over the wire as over JAX-B as XML or JSON. So here is the XML root element, which basically makes this being serializable through JAX-B as XML or JSON. So, and in Java 7, there are going to be many more examples of this, where the IDE will need to be aware of all the technologies together and how they work together. Okay. So, before we go to the next part of the presentation, I would like to do a small detour to application architecture. So this is kind of the classic application architecture for a web application, not even a Java EE application, just a web application. There may be various frameworks, whether standardized or not. You know, it's either EJB or Spring. On the view layer, it's JSF or Wikit or whatever. And the important thing is that here, basically, it communicates the browser via request response. And that was the traditional model. And basically everything was happening on the server. And we as Java developers weren't really concerned about what's going on in the browser. That was the designer's job, and we just did everything on the server side. Then when you look at a few years later, basically now a modern Java E6 application is now mostly standard based, because the standard has become very good. And you have all the business logic here, and JSF as the main kind of presentation logic technology at the top. And it still communicates via request response with the browser. In addition to that, there are some AJAX calls probably and partial page requests and things like that. From the beginning, I think one thing that the Java community got right was that there was also always a clean separation between the presentation logic and business logic. So I think that's understood for many years that that's a good practice. So now let's look at another application that you may want to build. So I have this application called Drawing Board, which was actually written by my colleague Martin Matula from the Jersey team. And it's basically a group drawing application. So it's actually already running here. So let's look at what it looks like in the browser. Okay. So, and it's a group drawing, so you would expect more than one person to use it at the same time. So let me fire up a new window and load it as well. And we can just create a drawing here. Okay, so it's picture one, create it. See what happens. So the other window, the other user received the update immediately and was notified of the fact that this drawing was created. Let's now go to the drawing and actually draw something. So we may draw a circle. Same thing. It's a group drawing application, so everything happens at the same time, simultaneously, like you would expect. So what's actually behind this application? Let's look at the source code and okay, so drawing WebSocket, that looks interesting. So there are imports of the new WebSocket API, which is new in Java EE 7. And this is basically a bidirectional communication protocol that allows the users, clients to communicate with the server in a bidirectional way, not just through request response. And basically, the drawing application is made possible through this. So this particular thing is used for drawing the dots and the shapes. And then there is where is it? Okay, and then there is something called SSE .star, server classes from SSE. So SSE stands for server sent events, and that's also an extension of the HTTP protocol, which allows to asynchronously send responses from the server to the IDE. To the client, and that's basically a server push technology that's been standardized quite recently, and but now it's supported by most major browsers. And so unfortunately, this is not supported by Java EE 7 per se, but there is the Jersey as the implementation of JAX-RS supports it through its own APIs. So these are Jersey APIs. They are not standard, but you can use them. They work, and you can use it for server-sent events. Okay, so let's go back to the. Let me actually close these windows. Let's go back to the diagram, and so this is basically the architecture of this kind of applications. So you see that there is bidirectional traffic. Over classic HTTP, of course, and additionally across through WebSockets, server-sent events. Here, in the darker color, there are technologies which make it possible or help with this on the Java EE side. So JAX-RS, as I mentioned, of course, that's a web services. So you would expect XML or JSON to be transferred over this. So JAX-RS is a natural candidate. WebSocket is a new APIs that I mentioned. So Java 7 has a new API for WebSocket. Servlet specification was revised and improved, so it has also some additional capabilities in this area. In particular, it allows so-called upgrade requests. So if you have an ordinary HTTP session, you can upgrade it to WebSocket through some negotiation protocol. JSON API is an API for standard mapping of or standard processing of JSON in your Java applications. The rest is the same basically on the server. So these technologies are very much relevant and used. On the right-hand side, basically HTML5, and that's basically a term for that's basically an umbrella term for a set of technologies, not just HTML5 itself, but also CSS3, modern JavaScript implementations, new JavaScript APIs in the browser, offline applications, and so on. And then, of course, you would expect your application to work across multiple devices, not just the desktop browser, but also tablets and phones. Okay. So here's just a summary of the HTTP protocol enhancements that I was talking about. So you can just read through them. I think that's, yeah. So one thing I didn't mention is cross-origin resource sharing. So this is kind of a new concept. So originally, HTTP protocol and browsers implemented a policy that when you have a page that was loaded from some browser, and this page makes an AJAX call, this AJAX call can only go back to the original server, and it cannot go anywhere else. That's for good reasons, like security, and it's called the same origin policy. It became apparent over years that it would be beneficial to somehow relax this policy, and in some cases allow to actually call other resources than the ones that are coming from the same server. So basically, there's a new standard for in the HTTP area for cross-origin resource sharing, which allows this based on some negotiations between client and server. So I would like to show you another application here. So so here's an application that provides a list of products as a service. And now I'm going to run the client for this. So this is oops, maybe the demo gods are not with us. Okay, so there is some problem here. Do you know what's the problem? The problem is that basically I didn't enable cross-origin resource sharing. So this application, the server is running on my Glassfish, whereas this is running somewhere else. This is another port, and thus it cannot be allowed. So what I'm going to do here is, fortunately there is a wizard in NetBeans for this. So create a cross-origin resource sharing filter. Okay, so let's see if the IDE auto-deployed the application correctly. Yeah, there it is. So this is my my list of companies or a list of manufacturers that basically is exposed by my Jersey APIs. And actually, right now you are seeing NetBeans Project Ezel in action. So this is the new. Here is the new support for Java HTML5 applications. So this client project is basically plain old static HTML5 site. So there are no dynamic pages, just HTML, CSS, JavaScript. And NetBeans has a specialized project type for this kind of applications. You may also have noticed this this tab, this bar saying NetBeans is debugging this tab. So that's because NetBeans is connected to the WebKit browser inside Chrome through a debugging session, which is able to manipulate the page. Actually, this is okay. So I can now say start select mode, and let me actually make this smaller. And when I select something, it's selected in the IDE. Let's make this smaller. Okay, here I see the styles that are applied to this component, and so on. So, but that's just an aside. This is Project Ezel in action. But you may have noticed that actually this application is created using the jQuery mobile framework. So it's basically, let me turn off the select mode. When I stopped select mode, then it's back to just normal operation. And so this is a framework that you would use normally on your phone. So, but I would like to maybe have some enhancements, and I would like to enhance this application somehow. Would it be nice if when I was running this application on my phone, then it could I would like it to match these companies with the contact list on my phone, and tell me, is this company already in your contact list on your phone? And if not, you may want to add it to your contacts. Would it be possible to do? Well, not really with plain web applications, but fortunately there is a little framework. So, yeah. By the way, this is one thing I didn't mention. So these are the frameworks that allow to that move the presentation logic in the client. So when you go back to the slide that talks about the HTML5 applications, you may have noticed that the presentation logic is no longer on the server. It's on the client, and that's made possible by these frameworks that are written in JavaScript, and which provide the control framework on the client in the browser. There are just some of these. This area is very fluid, and there are new ones popping up every month. So this slide will probably not be relevant by the end of the year. By the way, the drawing application that I showed earlier, the group drawing, that's using the AngularJS framework. So it's actually based on one of these frameworks. Okay, let's go back to the contact list question. So there is a framework called PhoneGap. Who has heard of PhoneGap? Okay, so basically this is a free toolkit sponsored by Adobe, also an Apache project, which provides integration with with the device. So what it does is basically takes your web application, packages it as a native application, and sends it to your phone. And basically, the model is that you are supposed to upload these applications to the mobile store and App Store, and it will be downloaded and installed by the user from the App Store. And then it has access to all these nice features of the device, such as accelerometer, camera, and there is contact. So if I'd like to talk to contacts on my phone, I could do it through this framework, and it works on many different platforms, about 8. They don't even fit on the slide. So there's lots of capabilities, and all these are exposed as a JavaScript library. So you have JavaScript APIs for your HTML5 applications, which basically facilitate the communication with the native device. So let's see how it actually works. So here is my application, and see that here is right now I was running this with Chrome. So let me change this to iPhone simulator and hit run. It's building. What's that? Hello. Okay, here is my contact list on the phone. Sorry, my company list on the iPhone simulator. So this is basically another feature of NetBeans 7.3 Project Ezel. That's going to be an add-on plugin that provides integration with mobile devices, both simulators and with actually real devices. So I tested deployment to my phone, and it works fine. So I didn't actually implement the functionality to add these companies to my contacts list, but you can imagine that could work that way. So here's just an overview of new capabilities in the other Java specs. JAX-RS, again, probably you may want to attend a specialized presentation on JAX-RS to find out more about this. Oh, there is one thing that I would like to show you. So standard API for filters and interceptors. So when I implemented this cross-resource sharing filter, it's actually a filter that basically goes through your request and response and does some operations on the request and response. And this is actually an E6 version, so you may be wondering how is this related to E7. And actually here is an E7 version of the same thing. Okay, there it is. And it looks almost the same. Can you tell what's the difference? Okay, so the difference is that in E6 there is I have com, sun, jersey, SPI, something. In the E7 version, this is actually a part of the spec. So as a part of the spec, Java WS-RS, as a part of the JAX-RS 2.0, I can create a filter like this without needing to use Jersey-specific APIs and internal APIs of each Jersey implementation. So that's what this item is all about, the standard API for filters and interceptors. There are more things I'm not going to talk about. I already talked about the server-sent events. Again, more APIs, WebSocket, Server 3.1, JSON API, all relevant to this class of applications. And here's a quick summary. So I think Java E platform is doing very well. and many more things are coming in E7, which will make it even better for the current class of applications. Besides, there are some important improvements which allow us to encourage us to write new class of applications, basically thin server apps or HTML5 apps or whatever we call them, and through APIs like WebSocket. And these are all supported in NetBeans 7.3 beta, which was released today, so you can go get it now. One thing I didn't talk about is that a future version of NetBeans, I call it 7.7, but that may change. So in this version, we would like to add support for E7 used by HTML5 frontend. So basically very good communication between HTML5 on the front end and E7 on the back end. Okay, so here are some resources. Aquarium is the Glassfish blog. Here's a page which contains progress on E7 specs. Really interesting. Glassfish, NetBeans, as I said, screencasts and more information on Project Ezel, and 7.3 beta. And if you'd like to see more, we are at the exhibition, and we'll be happy to see what's there in NetBeans 7.3. Okay, I'm not sure if we have room for questions. Maybe one, two? Two questions. Can we repeat, please? Roadmap for XHTML, you mean in JSF? I think that's just a part of the general E7 spec, so it's the same roadmap as the rest of E7. And from what I heard, the announcement was that the plan is to have the reference implementation in spring next year, so around April. And that will be the reference implementation, not the kind of production version of the server, but reference implementation in the spring. Final. Okay, and maybe one more question. There is one. Yes. Sorry.
You mentioned about the cross-domain sharing to break the same origin policy rule, right?
Yes.
So does it need any changes to the browser? Does the browser need to support something?
Yes. So the question was whether the cross-resource sharing policy requires changes on the side of the browser. The answer is yes. And so basically all browsers need to support it, and most modern browsers do. So I think if you look at there's a site called Can I Use, which tells you which browsers support what. When I looked, I think IE9 still doesn't support it, but all other browsers do, and IE10 will support it. So you probably will need to do some graceful degradation to support all the browsers, but the latest versions of all browsers will support it.
So that is related only to XML and HTTP call, the AJAX call, or it's not also to JavaScript? The JavaScript browser doesn't allow JavaScript to go outside the domain, right?
Yes, it's related to JavaScript. Okay, thanks a lot, everyone.